Okay. So today we are talking about training, which again is this part of Merge leadership team that I am a part of. So I'm the training coordinator as part of the Merge leadership team. So what that means is that I have kind of three main areas of training that I work on. So part of that is training our merge staff. That means when I hear about external training opportunities, like through other organizations, I'll sometimes just offer those to you guys and say, hey, does anybody want to participate in this training? You guys are always welcome to say, oh, yes, I'd love to be a part of that, or ask for more details if you're not sure about what that looks like. And sometimes those are things that are in person where you would have to travel to them. Sometimes they are um, like online, virtual. And then part of that is also things like what we talked about last week. If you were with me last week in safety, like if you want to do training in first aid for you or any members of your staff in your country, you would have to help us find those options probably, but then we can help get those set up, especially if they have a cost. We can talk about that as well. So that's kind of the first part of training our merge staff. The next is training merge staff on merge processes, which is things like this coach training that we're doing right now. It also means that like in the coming months, we're probably going to have another training on like the culture part of our team training to make sure that all of our coaches are set and know what they are expected to say when you're participating in training a team. Also, things like safety and security. We're probably going to have another training for our merge staff on our safety and security processes. So that's kind of another part of my job. And then the final part with our merge staff is following up on our planning sheets. So our planning sheet is a document that at this point you've maybe seen, maybe not seen. And that's kind of what we expect you as coaches to be using and following step by step as you're planning a trip. It gives you like very detailed, like, okay, 6 months before, here's what you need to do. So that planning sheet and me following up on that planning sheet is kind of that part, that third part of my work with our merge staff in the area of training. Today, we're going to kind of talk briefly about some of the other areas of training, but the bulk of our time today is going to be just going through the planning sheet. Just because I think that that's so important and it kind of brings together all the things that you're expected to do as a coach. The next things is I work with training with our teams. So part of that is coordination. So I do coordinating between our coach and the team, and then scheduling one of our trainers to go and train that team. So I kind of find, okay, what's a date that works with our coach? What's a date that works with our team? And then I find a date that works with one of our trainers, which is often Dale or I right now. But as we hopefully have more and more teams, we have a few other people. Heather does most of our trainings for our US teams, Heather and or Esau. And then we have a few other trainers too that are starting to get ready to help us with training teams as well. So you will probably hear from me and say, hey, you'll probably be copied on emails with the team. It's just helpful for me if you make sure that you answer those emails and then make sure you put it on a calendar or something so that you know that you have to be present for virtually for part of that training. So usually our trainings with our teams are about 4 hours long, and we try to connect with our merge coach in that country for about an hour, sometimes up to an hour and a half of that merge training. So, and then the other thing I do with teams is I send evaluations after the trip to the team leader, or the area of training does. I actually have a woman from Kansas City named Lainey Jones. She's working with me in the area of training right now. So she's actually helping out with some of these tasks. So she's sending the evaluations to the team leader. And then I compile that information for Heather, who's our merge staff care coordinator. And then she kind of checks in with you guys based on the information that we hear from those evaluations. And then finally, the third part of our kind of training through Merge is training our hosts. So any host ministry or global partner that receives a team, we expect them to be trained ahead of time. So I kind of work on, like right now, I'm kind of working on this fall into winter. I'm hoping to kind of revamp what our host training looks like. So for all of our teams that are coming next summer, you guys can kind of have like a brand new, here's like a manual of what that host training would look like. But then that training is actually something that you are expected to do as a merge coach. So that means going and meeting with maybe it's the pastor and the leaders of the church, or maybe it's a ministry that has a leadership, or the people that are going to be involved. Oftentimes, we want to include if there's anybody at the church or ministry or host site that's going to be cooking for the team, we want them to be there. So, kind of the people that are going to be very involved when the team is there, we have a training that we do with them. So, those are kind of the three main areas of training. Does anybody have any questions about any of those? I can't see you, so you're going to have to just unmute yourself if you do have any questions. Okay. Then before we get into the planning sheet, I just want to talk a little bit about host training because this is kind of something that you as the merge coach would be responsible for doing with your global partners. Again, this is something that we have a manual for, but I'm kind of looking at revamping, looking at the manual, seeing what we can do to change it, making sure it's in English, and then you guys may need to help make sure all that information is in the local language that your global partners speak. So within that, the areas that we want to make sure that they know before a team comes, excuse me, is kind of an introduction to merge. Just like how we the first week kind of focus on like an introduction to merge. This is who we are. We want our global partners that are working with merge to know that too. Who is a part of the merge staff? If they can just have a general idea of like, I'm your coach. That means I'm kind of the person that's helping doing all the facilitating and planning and there during the trip. If they can know like, okay, we're going to have interpreters here. We're going to have, and they can know who is a part of merge staff. But then if they also have an understanding of, and then there's a leadership team that are here to support us as well. That's helpful for all of our global partners to know. We also want them to know, what does a merge coach do? As you guys either already know or are going to find out soon, a merge coach does a lot of different things. So we want to make sure that our global partners know these are all the things that you as their merge coach can do. That you guys can, that you're helping with the planning ahead of time and all of those things. But we also want them to know that you're helping to facilitate connects and reconnects during and after the trip as well. The next thing is we want them to know our merge mission and values. So just like we drill into our coaches and our teams, our mission, which is that the global church is inviting you to participate in what God is doing around the world. We want to make sure that our global partners and our hosts know that as well. And then the same thing with our values. I know we've talked about our values both of the first two sessions, but we want to make sure that just as we're sharing that with you, just as we're sharing that with our teams, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understanding what are those values and why is that important. Because we want to make sure that we're all focused on relationship building and intercultural relationships and mutual learning and sharing a vision for lives being transformed in Christ and things like that. So we just want to make sure that that kind of helps us all to stay on the same page and to make sure that we're aligned as the trips are planned, but then also as they're executed as well. The next is the host participation, importance, and opportunities. So as we talk to our hosts, we want to make sure that they know what is expected of them. So this also means like we want to make sure that they know like we expect people from the global partner, from the host site to be present. We expect it to not just be the team is here all week, all by themselves in our space, right? But that we expect people to be around, to be interacting, to be forming relationships as well. And we also talk about, okay, what are the things that your ministry or your church are doing right now? And what opportunities do we have to partner together, to participate together with the team as they come? I'm going to actually skip down a little bit to talk about cultural exchange. That is one of those opportunities. Cultural exchange is something that we really want to focus on. And that's how are we intentionally building in time or activities that really focus on sharing our culture and learning from one another. So it's not just that this team that comes from somewhere else is going to come and learn about my culture just from being here, but that it can really be an intentional exchange where we're creating opportunities for people to, um, sorry, for people to have culture, to share their culture with one another. Yes. Okay, I'm sorry. The next thing is relationships. We want to make sure that our hosts are really focused on relationships. So just as we are wanting our teams to be focused on building relationships, it's important to us that our hosts also have that same idea. So it's not just that these people are going to come and they're going to be in our space and they're going to do these activities with us, but that it's really intentional about building the relationships. Work projects, if there's going to be a work project or a construction project or something like that, that's something that we kind of want to walk through. What is it going to look like? Who's going to be in charge? What are the tasks that are going to be done? And kind of help with some of the logistics and figuring out what will that look like with a team coming. Um, and then as we go down, money and accountability is also an important part. It's just we want to make sure that everything is clear. I think that we say like clear and kind communication is best. So just making sure that if there is any money or offerings, or if the church is going to help with any um, purchasing of anything or anything like that, that we're clear with what we need money wise, and like the accountability, which is like receipts and things like that and all of that. Um, and that may be on a case by case basis, but it's kind of just part of our general host training outline. And then you'll be able to say, like, okay, this is how this is going to work with this specific trip. And then the last one is talking about housing and food. We want to make sure that when we're training our hosts, we're talking about housing. Is the team staying in homes in the community? If they are, there are certain parameters that we need to make sure that they understand. Maybe it's things that we talked about with the safety last week. That maybe we expect that the team members are not riding in the back of a truck, for example, like we talked about last week, which might be totally normal in the context of our host and their community, but there are different expectations for the team. So we want to make sure that in things like housing, when they, especially for teams where they have members of the team staying in their homes, we want to make sure just that, like, hey, here's what we need to know, but also allowing them to have a chance to ask any questions of you as their merge coach. It can sometimes be nerve-wracking, or they can be unsure about like what to expect, inviting people into their homes or not knowing where the team is going to stay. So making sure that that is clear as well. And then finally, food. We want to make sure that food is covered in the host training. A lot of times our global partners and our hosts are part of people that help cook for the team. And maybe it's not even someone that is a part of the host ministry or church. Maybe it's other people that you want to invite to this host training because they're going to be the people cooking at the place where this team is staying or something like that. But we want to make sure that food is covered. We want to make sure that, for instance, that we're in a place where maybe the people in the community would drink water from the tap, from the sink, but we're telling our team members they should not be drinking water from the sink. We want to make sure that the people who are cooking know that, so that they're not giving them juice made with water from the sink when we're telling the team to make sure that they're drinking only bottled water and things like that. So there's just certain things about food, especially because the food is probably new to the team, the place is new, everywhere we go. Just like the change in diet can be new. So we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to make sure that the team stays healthy. And part of that is to make sure that we as merge coaches are doing the pre-work of training our hosts and what to expect and what they need to know. Okay. So that's kind of a general outline of what the host training looks like. Again, I'm kind of working on revamping the manual a little bit. So you guys will all see that in the next few months. And we'll probably do another training on that as well. Okay. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute at any point if you have any questions as we're going through, or if you have any comments that you want to share. I know that some of you that are on this meeting are brand new and have never led a merge trip. Some of you have been involved in merge trips for a long time. So especially as we move into this planning sheet, I know that some of you may have suggestions or comments about any of these things. So feel free to jump in if you do. So our planning sheet is divided into 6 different sections. So 4 of those sections come before the trip and 2 of those sections come after the trip. So it's very clear, kind of like, okay, here's the things that need to be done 6 months before, 4 months before, 2 months before, 1 month before, and then 1 month after and 6 months after. And then there's different areas regarding the team, the host, and the merge staff for each time. So like I said, we're going to go like literally just through the planning sheet. I know some of you already did this, but I think that it's just good practice. The other thing is it's really helpful if you are regularly 6 months, 4 months, 2 months, and 1 month sending this to me. It means it's a little bit less that you're going to hear from me saying, hey, do you have that? As you get closer. And then the other thing I want to just mention that I know some of you are like, when is this happening? Is we have talked about just kind of how can we make this a little more user friendly. My dream and goal is to create kind of an app where this could just be something easy on your phone or your computer or whatever device you have that you could just kind of fill in. But we are still in the process for that. So the first page of the planning sheet is just kind of details that we want to make sure that you guys are collecting. So it's like the date, how many participants, how many are men or women, female, male, the group information. So where's the contact information for the church that's coming, the host information, just to make sure that that's all in one place. The next thing is you're going to want to have your tentative schedule on the next page. So there's a space for you to put the tentative schedule. And then I also put, there's a space that if the tentative schedule, if you're in a country that does not speak English, or if you're working with a host site that does not speak English, you're going to want to have the tentative schedule in the local language as well. So that can be shared with them. So then when we talk about 6 months before the trip, 6 months before the trip, there's only things about group and host. So this one doesn't actually have any merge staff things yet. So at the top where it says 6 months before in the date, that's where you should actually be like typing in the date. So if I have a trip that's coming, they are going to arrive on December 1st. I know that 6 months before that is June 1st. So all of the things here should be done, or that's the idea. Ideally, these should all be done by June 1st. But at least I know that around June 1st is when I should be doing all of these things. And sometimes it looks overwhelming when you open up the planning sheet. It looks like there are so many things on this list. I don't know how I could do all those things by June 1st, for example. But a lot of these things can all be done in one email that's sent to the team. And a lot of our coaches may have a like email that they just use. That's like they're 6 months before email. This is kind of my draft that I use, and I just change the information I need to. So that's something to be thinking about as well. As some of these things you can kind of be starting to like think about like what works best for me for planning to make this as easy as possible. So the first one is going to be, have you offered training and a pre-trip? So training is going to be offered either by you or by me. Generally, some of our coaches have already reached out to teams and they've already been talking about training. By the time I reach out and the team says, oh yeah, we've already been talking to our coach and here's what we know. We have 2 options for training. We do online training if the team has less than 10 participants, just because like budget wise, we can't afford to send a trainer to their place. Or we do in-person training if the teams have more than 10. But you should know when that training is. So You can even circle at the top, say in person. I know it's going to be in person. Um, Mandy hasn't reached out to the team yet. I haven't reached out to the team. So you can reach out to the team and ask, are you going to do training? And then how many participants do you have? Or maybe you already know how many participants, and you can email me and say, hey, Mandy, I know that the team coming from California to my location is going to have 12 participants. Are you going to reach out about training or would you like me to? And then we can get those started. So if we do an in-person training, it's usually just one day. Like I said, it's usually about 4 hours. And then you would write who's going to train the team. It may be Dale, it may be Mandy. In the future, it may be Jen or Katrina or Lainey, or maybe it's Heather. So you can kind of put in who trains the team so you know who your contact is going to be for that day of training. If there's an online training, which again is those less than 10 participants, we usually do that in two different sessions. So each session is about an hour long. Just like with you guys, we think an hour is about as long as people can pay attention on Zoom. So we usually do those over 2 dates. You are not necessarily expected to be at both of the online trainings. We usually try to do training number one with just the trainer and the team. And then training number two for the online training would include the coach because that's going to be kind of more that culture piece that you guys speak to. Okay. The pre-trip, we also want to make sure that you're offering a pre-trip. That is that maybe the leader of the team or a couple people from the team can come down ahead and kind of see what they need to see. Most of our teams don't do that, but we want to make sure it's something that you are offering as an option that's available to them. And I think a lot of our teams, it's just an extra expense for them to buy plane tickets and things like that to go on a pre-trip. And for that reason, most of them don't. I also want to say at this point, like if you ever have questions and you're like working through a planning sheet and you're like, I'm not sure, I can't remember what this means, you can always reach out to me or any member of the leadership team. We are always happy to be asking questions. Sometimes people ask me questions and I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Let me find out. So if I don't know the answer, I will try to find out. So the next thing on here is that your distance transportations are offered. So this is kind of saying, hey, this is going to be the best airport for you to fly into. Maybe you're between a couple airports and you say you can fly into this airport and it would be a 2-hour bus ride, or you can fly into this airport and it's a 1-hour bus ride, and letting the team choose. Maybe you only have one airport that they can fly into. Maybe they could fly or drive, and you're offering, hey, you could drive here or you could fly here. Here's your two options. And just kind of sharing that information with them. Depending on where your location is. Obviously, not many of our teams are going to drive to Thailand or Africa, but some of our teams might be able to drive to northern Mexico. So that's kind of where that comes. The next one is going to be similar, but it's the local transportation. So once the team has arrived in country, here's the transportation options we have. And maybe you only have one option and you say, hey, our transportation is we rent this van and here's the cost of what that looks like. And this is the option that we have. Maybe you have a couple different options that you've worked with and they have different prices or different like maybe this option splits up the team into two and this option keeps the whole team together, and you're kind of offering those different options you have. Similarly, you want to be talking to the team about here's the housing options. You can be staying in homes in the community that you're partnering in, which is something we always encourage. It just helps the teams to learn more about each other, the teams and the hosts to learn more about each other, to really connect more and build those relationships. But sometimes I've had teams come to communities where like that's not something they would ever do. There may be more remote communities where they don't feel comfortable having people stay in their homes, and that's okay. And we of course respect the communities that we're working in, and we're never going to force that either. And maybe there's a team where they're not ready for that either. I think that we can gently encourage that, especially if the community wants them to stay in their homes, we can encourage that. But that's why we're kind of offering options. You can say, hey, this is what we recommend. And then if the team comes back and says, no, we're not comfortable with that, then you can kind of go back and say, okay, let's talk through that a little bit. And then if it comes down to like, no, we're not comfortable with that, okay, here's the other options. The next thing is visa info detailed. You want to make sure that you're telling the team you do or don't need a visa or sending them the website. If you have, like, if your country has a good website that says, here's the kind of visa you need, here's if you need any vaccines or anything to get into the country. Um, if there is a good website, you can just send them that website. Otherwise, if you know kind of you need to get a tourist visa ahead of time for some countries. Some countries you can get a tourist visa if you're coming from the United States, but you get it like when you get into the country. They just stamp your passport with a visa. That's something that's good for you guys to know. Sending the minor permission letter. So the minor's permission letter is a letter that we have that says that if someone under the age of 18 is traveling without both of their parents, this gives them permission to go. So that's something that you need to send to the team, and then the team would fill out. Obviously, if your team doesn't have anybody under the age of 18, then you don't need to send that letter if it's all adults coming on the trip. But that's where you need to kind of know the breakdown of the team to know whether you need to send that or not. The next is the immunization info sent. That's what immunizations do they need to come into the country, but then also the immunizations that we recommend as merge as well. And this is just something that, again, most of you will probably at some point just kind of have a form letter or a form email that you send that says, hey, here's all the information as we're getting ready to start your trip. Kind of like, here's all the things that you need to know. Specific to your country, because some countries will require you to have a yellow fever vaccine to get into the country, and others won't. So it's hard for us to kind of have like a merge email that's the same for everybody, but you'll kind of start to format yours based on the specific needs of your country. The next thing is to go over ministry and work options with the group. Like say, okay, you're coming to this global partner. You're going to be working with this partner here in our country. Here's kind of the ministry and options that they're doing here and the options that you have to be a part of. And that as you're kind of presenting these options of like, here's what's happening in the place that you're coming to partner, that's where you're starting to formulate ideas for when you're going to have to create that tentative schedule. General info about the host site. This is really helpful for teams because they don't know where they're going. So if you can send general information about here's where it's at, if you can send pictures, teams love to see pictures of like, okay, this is what the church looks like. That's really helpful for them when they're sharing with their sending church or when they're sharing with the people who are going to be a part of their team that's praying for them as they're gone. It's really great if they already have pictures and a little description about the church or the ministry that they're going to be working with. And then the final thing that you need to do with groups 6 months before the trip is talking about tourist options. Most teams do half a day to a day of tourist activities. So you're going to want to be thinking about what are the tourist options that are available in the area where we're going to be. I know we talked a lot about safety last week, and so sometimes thinking of that safety piece as well. Specifically, when we talked a lot about swimming, especially depending on which session you were in last week. But maybe swimming is something that you're like, I'm not going to take a group swimming. Or maybe that's all that there is to do. But kind of offering here's the tourist options that we have available. Maybe you're in a big city and there's tons of tourist options, and the team is going to have to kind of pick and choose what's most important to them. So I would give them an idea of here's the options, and here is what I would recommend for how many options you can choose.
Hi, Mandy.
Yes.
I have a question. So, how every item in this planning format, how detailed does it have to be, or is there an individual format for each item which has all the details?
So it will kind of depend on your site and probably even maybe sometimes the team that you're working with, how detailed this is going to be. So like for some of you, tourist options offered might be, so for instance, when I was in Ecuador, I worked as a merge coach in Ecuador, and our tourist options was usually like, hey, here's kind of what we can do. We can go to the Mitad del Mundo, which is the equator. We can go to the big monument that's not actually on the equator. There's also a small museum next to it that's on the actual equator that has like little um, experiments and stuff. Or we can go into Quito and go on the Teleférico, which is a cable car that goes up a mountain. And so at this point, I'm just kind of offering those three things. I'm probably going to say a sentence about each one. And then I'm going to say, when you arrive in Ecuador, you'll need to have a valid passport with 6 months on it, and then you'll have a visa stamped into your passport. Um, and I would say, so I think like most of these things can be a sentence or two in all one long email. Um, does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So that is all of what you're going to communicate with a group. And again, the first time that you have a team, we will probably have someone kind of working with you and helping you to fill this out. But no matter how many teams you've had, if you get to something on the planning sheet and you have a question, please, please, please reach out. I've had in the last year some of our leadership team members, right? They've led hundreds of teams and they reached out and said, "Hey, I have a question about this one." And I was like, that's a good question. And the fact that nobody else has asked it means not everybody's following the planning sheet. So please know that our planning sheet is not perfect. The fact that you have a question doesn't mean you don't know what you're doing. It may mean that you're doing a really good job of filling out the planning sheet. Um, and so then the last things that you need to do 6 months before is inform the leader of the dates. So this is again the host communication. So this is talking with your global partner. So you want to let them know, hey, these are the dates the team's coming. You want to brainstorm learning activities, relational opportunities, and ministry ideas. So some of these kind of have to be done in a certain order. You obviously can't go over the ministry and work options with the group until you've brainstormed those with the host. So some of these kind of go hand in hand, but some of them kind of are in order. You have to do one before you do the other. And then meet with the leader and then talk about host training. If this is a team if this is a host that receives 4 groups every year, you don't need to do host training every group, right? They had a group 2 weeks ago. They don't need host training again. But I would say we want to make sure that our hosts are being trained probably at least once a year. Even just like our teams, like even for our teams that go back every year, we still recommend they do training every year. So we would do the same thing with our hosts. And you can always tailor that as much as you need to. If you need to change it so that, because this is a host that's had training a million times, you have the freedom to do that as well. And so that's all you're doing with the hosts for 6 months before. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because I'm also going to try to keep this to 1 hour today, just like we do. This is the 4 months before. So 4 months before a team comes, this is when under group communication, we want to make sure videos, photos are shown of the host site. If you already did that when you sent information 6 months before, you can write down, I already did that, right? Connect event. So we want to make sure, I'm going to talk a little bit about connect event. A connect event is before your team comes. We're hoping that you're doing some sort of event that's connecting them so they can kind of start to see each other. Maybe it's a big Zoom call where you have the church that's coming from the United States and the church that they're partnering with in your country. And they're all on this big Zoom call, and you have a couple questions that you're going to ask them to share. And it's just we want to make sure that as we talk about how relationships are so important, that we're creating ways to foster this relationship. So maybe you have a connect event that's 3 or 4 months before the team comes. And then afterwards, we're going to talk about a reconnect event afterwards, which is kind of like a follow through, a follow up, and that maybe that's 3 or 4 months after the group leaves. And that means this team, if they're coming back every year, they're connected throughout the year with this partner that they're working with. The next thing on here is 4 months before, you need to be getting a budget estimate from Dale. And this actually tells you you should be contacting Dale. So that means we know that you are not doing this part of the planning sheet if you are not contacting him. Okay? And then he will help you with that. Sorry, one moment. Sorry, my husband's getting our kids ready for soccer today. So then we have the next thing is going to be the distance transportation planned. So this is something that you're just communicating with the team about. Obviously, you're not planning their transportation of their flights when they arrive, but you're asking them, hey, do you have flight information yet? And then as soon as you do, you're going to actually type it into the group communication under arrival and departure information. This document is a Google Doc. So what we would say is you should be making a copy of this, or I'm playing around with the idea of maybe I'm going to make a copy of this and send it to you and say, hey, here's your planning sheet for this team. As soon as we know a new team is coming. But anyway, in any case, you should have a copy of the Google Doc so that you can actually fill in the information here. So that when you say, when is the team coming, you should be able to look at your planning sheet and right there it says the arrival and departure information. And then what I would do is as soon as I put that information there, I'm going to go put that in my tentative schedule as well. The next thing is the local transportation, having that planned and reserved. What am I using? What am I renting? Do I have, and then like actually reaching out to the company that you're using or the person that you're reserving it with and making sure that that's reserved for the dates that you need it for. The same thing with housing, making sure the housing is planned and reserved, whether that be that you're staying in homes with the team or you're staying in the church or you're staying in a hotel or wherever the team is staying, you want to make sure that that is all reserved. And that includes like the first night that they're there after they fly in, the last night before they leave, if those are going to be different than the rest of the week, making sure that all of that is planned and reserved and you can fill in all that information there. The opening briefing. So here, the opening briefing and the closing meeting are two things that we do with our teams. So the opening briefing is usually the first day that they get there or the next day, depending on flight times and stuff. And that's just kind of sharing like reminders about things that they learned during training, reminders about like logistical things they need to know, kind of going over things that they may need to know as the trip starts. And then closing meeting is similar, but it's more of like a debrief of their trip, kind of helping them to think about how the trip went, thinking about going home and what that looks like. But you want to make sure that those are planned and then put into your trip schedule as well, your tentative schedule, as we always remind the groups. And then the last thing is the tourist options confirmed. So you gave some options. You want to make sure that you know what they picked and that those are in the schedule. And then sending your trip schedule to the group. So again, it should have at least a few things in there. It should have at least the arrival and departure information, opening briefing, tourist things, closing meeting. You should have a general idea of some of the things that they're going to do as well. And then an estimate for work projects. So if they're going to do any construction or work or painting or anything like that, you want to make sure you have an estimate for how much that's going to cost for materials, tools, all of those things. So then we talk about kind of our host communication. What are we doing with our host? And some of these things are the same. So a connect event between the host and the team is planned. So you can say if you already said, oh, I planned it on such and such a date, now you've already done it for the host as well. Learning activities planned. What are our intentional activities that we're doing for the team to be learning and for the host to be learning about the team? What are those intentional learning activities, those intentional cultural learning activities? When are those happening during the week and what's the event going to be? The next thing is relational opportunities planned. What relational opportunities do we have specifically where the host and the team are focused on building relationships? And sometimes that is similar to the learning activity. Sometimes they're going to be completely separate. So thinking about that. If you're doing a construction project, do you have a foreman from the host site? Do you have cooks from the host site? Do you have local volunteer interpreters? If you have any of those people coming from the host ministry or church, you want to make sure that you have done those searches and kind of figured out, okay, here's the people that will be helping with each of those. And then an estimate for the work project. Again, if they're doing any construction or work projects, how much is that going to cost? You've also sent the schedule to the host and had input from them on that schedule. The next thing is our merge staff preparation. So this is the first time we've done anything with the merge staff preparation. And you want to have a merge budget estimate from the MC, which is the merge consultant, Dale Lusk. And that says you have to contact Dale. Again, same thing. You are responsible for contacting Dale for that information. And then possible staff. Okay, I know that I have for this trip, I'm going to have two trip interpreters and someone that's in charge of our food. So who are my possible staff? I know I have this interpreters available that week, and I could talk to my other interpreter that I usually use, and they're not available. So you kind of have started to figure out who are your possible staff for the week that the team is going to be there. I don't see, did I miss anything on there? Let me see. Yeah, ask for money to visit sites. So if you need to visit sites and you don't have enough merge money on hand, you would contact Dale and ask for that. And the merge security protocols file. So that's what we talked about last week and went through with Ale in depth last week, is that merge securities protocol. You're going to review it and revise it if you've already done it, or you're going to complete it if you are doing it for the first time. 2 months before. So again, at the top, you're going to fill in the date. So if my trip is on December 1st, 2 months before is going to be October 1st. So just talking about my group, I'm going to remind them about the visa and the passport, that they all need to have a copy of their passport with them. I already have the local transportation, the van that we're going to use with that team has already been planned and reserved. I'm going to confirm that. I'm going to confirm the housing. And make sure that those are all still set and that they still have my reservation and all of that stuff. Emergency numbers. I'm going to make sure the team has my phone number as their merge coach. I'm going to make sure they have any other merge emergency phone numbers they need. I'm going to make sure that they have their address of where they're going to be staying in the country. Most countries, you have to have that address when you get to the country before they even see you. So make sure that they have the address of where they're going to be staying, because it's going to ask that on their customs forms that they fill out. The next thing is the direction to the meeting place upon arrival. When they arrive at the airport, I want to give them detailed instructions on where they're going to find me when they leave the airport. I'm going to send them an updated schedule. Even if you haven't changed anything, it's always helpful to just resend the schedule. It'll be closer to the top of their email inbox. It'll be easier for them to find. So just say like, hey, I don't think anything's changed since the last time I sent this 2 months ago, but again, here's our trip schedule. It also just is like a good reminder of them to look at it again. Maybe they'll think of something that they want to add or something that they see this time that they didn't see last time. A tool list sent to the leader if they are doing any construction projects or anything like that. Or the next thing with the ministry materials, any of the ministries that they're participating in, if there's things that they need to bring with, send that to them. We want them to have that 2 months before, because they're probably already starting to think about suitcases and packing and how many suitcases are we going to bring and things like that. So making sure that they know what they're expected to bring is good 2 months before. Excuse me. Devotions and debriefing plans with the team leader. Ask the team leader, are you planning to do your own devotions and debriefing at the end of the day? Is that something you would like Merge to do for you? We as Merge staff can provide devotions in the morning and kind of facilitate debriefings with the team in the evenings if that's what they prefer. So every team will be a little bit different here. If you are going to do the devotions, we have a number of different documents that you can use that have like pre-written devotions if you want to, or if you feel comfortable kind of leading your own devotion, you're welcome to do that as well. If you ever are like, hey, I'm going to lead the devotions for this team and I don't know where those documents are, just ask and we can help you find those. The next thing is host communication. So again, we're just going to confirm all the information that we already figured out last time. So we're going to confirm the learning activities and the relational opportunities. We're going to confirm the cook and the foreman. We're going to talk about promotion of the ministry. How are they promoting the ministries that you're going to be doing in their community? So we want to make sure that people come. We want to make sure that if they're doing a kids program for youth in the community, we want to make sure that there's youth in the community that are there. And then again, you're sending them the updated schedule in their local language if needed. And housing discussion, that you're kind of discussing specifics for housing. And this would also be at some point here, either 4 months, 2 months. You want to make sure that if they're staying in homes and you've kind of said, okay, here's the 6 homes that are going to house the team members, you want to make sure that now you've actually made a plan for, okay, here's these 3 people are going to stay in this home and these 3 people are going to stay in this home before the team gets there. But that's something that you would coordinate with the team leader and the host. And then ministry supplies. Before you obviously send the list to the team, you have to get the list from the host. And then your merge staff preparation. Last time you were kind of starting to think of who could be on my merge staff. Now you actually should have your staff planned. Here's the specific people that are going to be working on this trip with me. If you have staff coming from somewhere else, either a merge coach from another country that's coming to help you out, or maybe someone coming from another spot inside your country, you want to make sure those tickets have been purchased and you've reserved local transportation and housing for your staff as well. Obviously, if the team is staying at a hotel, you need to have hotel rooms for your staff as well. Finally, is sending your security protocols. So that's that document that you completed 4 months before. Now you're sending it to Dale, Evie, and the leadership team. We want to make sure that we all have that information so that if something were to go wrong, we kind of know, okay, here's all the things that were planned. Here's where their safe house is going to be. All of that information. And then that you're looking at your merge money. Do you have enough merge money for the trip? And if not, you're asking for Dale to send you that money. Um, and again, we want to make sure that's done 2 months before because sometimes people are asking days before a trip happens and they're saying, hey, Dale, can I get money if I don't have enough money for this trip? It's not always possible to get it sent that quickly. So we want to make sure that it's done in advance. Okay, 1 month before. Again, you've already had the Connect event. You already planned it earlier. Now we're wanting to make sure you're doing it. Local transportation and housing are reconfirmed. Again, confirm, confirm, confirm. We don't want to get to the point where we're like, well, I reserved it once 6 months in advance, which for some countries is so far in advance that they're not even really thinking about it. We want to make sure that we're just confirming and resend the trip schedule. And then this is another time where you're going to want to know what medical conditions, what mental conditions, what food allergies are the people on the team coming that I need to know about. And that you have the devotions and debriefings in the schedule. And I would say, like, if your merge staff are going to do devotions, that you would say, like, on Monday, we have morning devotions led by Mandy. On Tuesday, we have morning devotions led by Daniela. On Wednesday, we have morning devotions led by Mandy, and kind of specifically outline who's doing it. Or if the team's doing it, you can say morning devotions led by team, just to make sure that everything is very clear and that there aren't any confusion. Host communication. 1 month before the trip, we want you meeting with the leader. Kind of, are there any last questions? Anything else we need to think about? Distributing schedules. The host leadership needs to have a schedule. The cooks need to have a schedule. The foremen need to have a schedule. Anyone that's going to be involved in the trip needs to have a schedule. We want to make sure if they are buying food for the meals they're cooking, that they have that money. Work money, if there is work projects happening, that money is distributed as well. And again, during their training, you've already gone over exactly what you need in return in regards to receipts and things like that as well. The promotion of the ministry is confirmed. Are they passing out flyers? Are they telling people at church? Like, what are they doing? Confirm that with them. And then the confirmation of who's going to be involved at every event, who's going to be at this event. So we aren't just having teams come to just hang out by themselves. And then merge staff preparation. You have your final staff budget from Dale. Your schedule is sent to Dale. You have your staff confirmed. So I know if I have anybody in any of these areas, here's who's going to be in each area. You want to send your staff the schedule. You want to do your volunteer staff training. So if you have volunteers or people from your country that are helping you out, this would be like not like if you have a merge coach coming from another country, that's not what we're talking about here. But if you have volunteer staff that maybe have never worked with merge or haven't worked with merge in a while, we have training that we want you to be doing with them as well. You again have confirmed the transportation and housing for your staff. You've given Evie an in-country contact information for you. First aid kit. Make sure you have your first aid kit. Check your first aid kit. Do you have everything you need in there? If there's anything you're missing, Go out and purchase that and add it to your first aid kit. That can usually be done with the money from the team. Um, if it's like if you're having an issue with that, or it's like something big that's really expensive that you need in your first aid kit, let us know. We'll figure that out. And then the devotions and debriefings are planned if the merge staff are going to be involved in that. All right. So this is kind of our last section of the planning sheet that comes before the trip. So those are all the things that have happened before the trip. And you can see a lot of those are like repetitive, that you're like, oh, I can't confirm this again. But we want to make sure that we're confirming and reconfirming and making sure that everything is as planned as we can so that there aren't issues when the team comes. Okay, so now the team came, we had a really great trip, and here's what we're going to do after. And I'm going to try to finish this up in the next 5 minutes or so, because I want to be respectful of your
Excuse me a
time.
minute.
Yes,
I have another question.
yes, good.
I don't know if I missed it, but is there a specific item for when the group leader or pastor, whoever comes, is asked to preach a certain service, or where do you suggest we write that down in the planning?
Yeah, so I would say that that would be for me, like as you're talking to the, I think it's like 4 months before, 6 months before, as you're like starting to talk about, like you're getting input from on the schedule from your hosts 4 months before, and then 2 months before you're talking about different things and making your list. That's where I would be having those conversations. I mean, 6 months before, probably even two. Are you expecting somebody to preach during church on Sunday from the group? And if the host says, yes, we would love to have somebody from the group preach, you're going to talk to the group and say, hey, do you have somebody that would be willing to preach? Yes. And then make sure that you're coordinating that. Is there a certain topic or thing that you want them to preach on, or are they open to preach what God leads them, what God leads them, or the word that God gives them, and kind of facilitate that conversation so that there's clarity and that the host doesn't think they're going to be preaching as a part of the um, sermon series they're doing, and then they come and preach something completely different. Just that you're facilitating that conversation about, okay, they would like for you to preach, and they asked if it's possible for you to preach from this certain passage, or they asked you to preach and said that you can preach from whatever you would like. And then putting that in the trip schedule. So every time you're sending that trip schedule, it should have as many details as possible. So the Sunday service is from 9 to 11:30, and the so and so from the team is going to preach, or these two people from the team are going to share a testimony, or maybe the team is going to sing a couple songs in English during the church service. As much detail as you can put in that schedule will help you, one, remember what was decided, right? Because if I decide something 6 months before a trip, and then a month before the team asks me, like, hey, what were you supposed to do during the church service? If you can look back at that schedule, you can say, oh, yeah, your pastor was going to preach and you guys are going to sing 3 songs. And that information is all there and readily available for you. Does that answer?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for asking questions. Okay, so now we had a great trip. Everything went well, and here's what's going to happen afterwards. So, our group communication, follow-up meetings planned. Maybe you're going to have a Zoom call just with the team. So that would be under Zoom call. Maybe you've already planned your merge reconnect, which is going to be 2 months after the trip. And that's going to be a Zoom call, things like that. If you know when the team is debriefing, write those dates in here. And we would encourage you to ask, hey, when is your team meeting for a debriefing? I'd love to be praying for you while you're debriefing the trip. We also want you guys to do that as a way to help encourage our teams to continue to meet together after the trip. They do a pretty good, our teams generally tend to do a good job of meeting before the trip, to plan it, to think about it, to dream about it. It's exciting, it's coming up. And then afterwards, it's a lot harder for them to get together. People are busy, schedules come up, and it's harder for them to get together. So it's great if you guys are asking for those dates, because it's a way of kind of encouraging, forcing them to give you dates. Write a fundraising note to our teams. Merge relies a lot on our fundraising to make sure that we can support our coaches, to make sure that we all have a professional expense each year, for example, which you'll hear more about next week. But a fundraising is important to Merge, and it's part of how we make Merge sustainable. Right now, Dale actually does the majority of our fundraising. So especially as Dale moves toward retirement, that's going to be more and more important. If you need help writing a fundraising note, or you're like, hey, I don't know what that would even look like, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Mario or Daniela. We can send you like a form letter of like, hey, here's a note that people have sent before. Obviously, change the names and things like that, but we can help you with ideas for that. And then the next thing is a potential intern, information sent to our Merge consultant, Dale. So this is Merge is now kind of part of like a global pathway with the Covenant Church, where our hope is that our Merge short-term trips are leading to like some people that we may be on our trip and we may say like, oh, that person would be great to go on a Merge internship for 2 to 3 months. And then maybe that person would be great to continue, or maybe of the 10 people that do that, maybe there's one or two that would be great to continue to go for 2 to 3 years. And then from those 10 people that go for 2 to 3 years, there's maybe one or two people that would be great to continue for like a career in something in global personnel through the covenant. So this is kind of a pathway that we've talked about, and I can share more about that personally if you want to reach out to me. But all that we're asking from you as a Merge coach is when you're on your team, if you can just be watching the team, look for 1 to 2 people that you think would be great to go for 1 to 3 month something after the trip. Currently, there's actually a bonus for this. So if you give Dale the name of 1 or 2 people from your trip and one of them actually ends up filling out an application after he reaches out to them and explains the whole process, he'll give you a $250 bonus just for giving him the name. So that's a really easy way to kind of encourage you to be like looking at your teams for people that you're like, this person really gets it. They seem like they're really involved. They seem like they would be somebody that would want to continue. They seem like somebody, you can always ask the host too, like say like, hey, is there someone on the team that you're like, they would really be a great person to be involved in global ministry, and have the host help you pick a name or two. And again, all you have to do is send the name to Dale. He will reach out to them and say, hey, your Merge coach was really impressed with you this week, and here's what all the information. So you don't have to know any of the information, you just send the names to Dale. The same thing with following up with our hosts. We want to make sure that you're doing a personal visit, getting an evaluation from them, kind of saying like, hey, how'd things go? Are there things that we need to do better, things we need to change, all of that. Just kind of continuing that relationship with the host site, and then the Merge reconnect with the team. And then the Merge staff things, we updating the manual. So Evie has a country manual for every country we work in. So you would be working with Evie to kind of revise that, see if there's anything that needs to be changed in that manual. Maybe your country's never been worked in. Maybe we need to create a manual. That would be good to know too. And then send your ministry numbers to Daniela and Dale, which is like, okay, here's the different events we did and how many people, how many participants there were at each one. So maybe you did a kids program and there were 100 kids. You would send that information to them. And then the expense report to Daniela and Dale. And those things will both be talked about a little bit more next week. And then the other thing is sending photos and story to Evie and Mario, to our admin in the offices, Evie, and to Mario, who's our Merge communications coordinator. And so that is just, they use those stories. They share them on social media. They use them for sharing in our newsletter and things like that. And then finally, the very last thing we'll talk about today is just 6 months after. So this is a long time after the trip, but we just want to make sure, follow up with the group, ask them, say like, hey, how did your involvement in this trip change the way your church or your ministry, your team is interacting with your community? That's something we would talk to them about. We say like, we want to make sure, we would love to see this change the way that you're interacting with your community at home. And so we just ask you to ask them, say like, hey, I was just wondering if there's a way that this has really changed the way that your church is interacting in your community. And that's all you have to do. And then if they share any of those stories, obviously with permission, send those to EB and Mario. And then the same thing, send another story to EB and Mario that you can think of from the host site. Like what's something that you've seen that's changed since the team came? Or what's a story that happened during the trip that you can now kind of elaborate on and see how that has grown throughout the connects or whatever like that. So just kind of how has that continued after the trip? All right. And that is our merge planning sheet. I know it's a lot. It's a lot of information. It's a lot. But the idea is that you are slowly going through that over the months up to the trip. And we have the documents so that you can kind of take the time to go through each step and that you have support from us as well as you need it. Any other questions before we finish up? All right, then thank you very much. I know it's long and boring to just sit and listen to me talk, but we appreciate you taking the time and being here, and hopefully it is helpful. And otherwise, I will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. And I will send out the video as well.
Okay.
Okay, see you